Okay, so welcome back. I didn't even get a chance to put the interview that we did earlier this, or I think it was last month, but a lot has changed since then. Let's just put it that way. So you're fresh off a protest or a rally. Tell me about from the time that we got off our interview, and tell me about all the things that have happened since then, how that's affected you, how that's affected your movement. Is it a positive thing? Is it negative? Is it kind of somewhere in between? Because I know we discussed that you guys really wanted to do this all on your own, but then obviously there's been some U.S. intervention, and we don't know how much is to come. Yeah, let me hear your take on everything.
Well, a lot has changed, as you mentioned. We saw today is day 8 of the war. The reality is that, as we clarified last time, we don't support foreign intervention in Iran, but we also don't see appeasement as a solution to Iran. We think that the only solution is change brought about by the people of Iran and their organized resistance. And we still stand by that. And I think the more we go into the war and people see that, the implications of a war, the more you realize that that is the correct policy forward for Iran. Iran is very different from many other countries in the region or around the world. Iran, just look at how this war has extended in the past week. Israel and the US attacked Iran. Iran retaliated and attacked other countries in the region. And it's not even limited to the region, because they actually targeted Cyprus too. And now the Iranian regime has been making threats plans, speaking about plans to attack Albania, and because that's where the Iranian resistance is based, members of the MEK are based. And well, if that actually happens, Albania is a NATO country, so this automatically just grows this war to a completely different dimension. And I don't think that anyone benefits from such extensive war. Right now, we are seeing the human casualties, both inside of Iran, but also in other countries right now that are being targeted by the regime. And so this devastation is not going to stay limited. We're also seeing the destruction of, key infrastructures, because, as I said, the Iranian regime is, manipulating the whole situation too. Like, for instance, one of the things that they're doing is they're launching their missile or rocket attacks from inside of civilian areas. So when they're detected, the places that are being hit are civilian locations. So that is also increasing the civilian casualties of this war. And that is the nature of this regime. This is exactly what the regime did back in the 1980s during the Iran-Iraq War, and this is what it strives on. So that, in that sense, it is a very critical situation, and that's why we think that the solution is not a war, because, as I think we discussed last time, Iran is not Iraq or Afghanistan or Libya. Iran is also not Venezuela, because a lot of people had this in mind, like what we saw on the first day of the war was the elimination of Khamenei. Well, some people were like, okay, so you guys have to be happy about that. Khamenei has been eliminated. Yes, there were people who were celebrating that Khamenei was gone. That's, I think, natural for Iranians to be happy about that, even though they did want to see Khamenei be held accountable for the crimes that he had perpetrated. But it doesn't stay limited to that. This war is continuing, and so that now people are coming face to face with the devastations of war and the circumstances that it creates, and how it actually allows the regime to increase its suppression on the people too. So these are the other sides to this war right now, as it's playing out. And I think that's really important to understand and take into consideration. And especially when you think about like the long term, where is this going to? How is it going to come to an end? I think the U.S. government has made clear the issue at hand for them is not the freedom of the Iranian people or regime change. For them, it's Iran's nuclear program and missile program, and having some kind of guarantees that there won't be threats made against the U.S. and Israel anymore. But the reality is that until this regime exists, those threats are going to continue to still exist. But in reality, the only way to be able to create true change in Iran and to create a stable democracy in Iran, it's change brought about by the people of Iran. Unfortunately, democracy is never installed in a country, and Iran is not. I mean, it's not the first, it's not going to be the last, but that's not how it works. And the reality is that I think that our people have the capability to bring about change themselves. And that is, but unfortunately, until now, what has been an obstacle in their path has been the policy of appeasement toward the regime. And we have paid a grave price for that policy of appeasement. But if you were saying like there's a lot that has happened in the past month since we last spoke, the reality is that we also saw how things were developing and evolving on the ground before the start of this war. Just 5 days before the start of the war, we saw 250 members of resistance units carry out a operation against the headquarters of Khamenei. And this was unprecedented in the last over 2 decades, actually. And 250 people carrying out a organized operation against the most secure location in the country, and at a time that it's on the highest alert for security, because from a day or two before, talks of the threats of a war taking place or negotiations with the US and things had started. So and it was also coinciding with the 40th day ceremonies of those who had been killed by the regime in the uprisings, and it was simultaneous with the demonstrations that had broken out across universities across Iran. So the regime was on its highest alert possible, and still this was carried out. So that in itself had a clear message for the people of Iran. It was, first of all, showing the roadmap ahead and the direction that we need to go to or go towards. And on the other hand, it also showed how weak the system of the regime has become, that such a thing is even possible at a place that they never thought it would be. And so we were seeing that develop. And as I mentioned, after the uprising in Iran, the Iranian regime had shut down all universities and had said all classes will be held online. And they had just decided to resume classes the Saturday before the war started. So like 2 weeks ago, actually. And the day that the universities were resumed, protests started forming across campuses across Iran. And so the regime realized very fast, within like 2-3 days, they gave a statement that all classes need to go online again, and all campuses have to be evacuated, because the regime saw that this potential is still in society, and despite all the killings, people have not given in or given up, and they're going to continue this fight until they see the change they want to see, because they have learned their lesson from this uprising, and that is that if we don't push for that final phase, this cycle is bound to repeat and more brutal each time, because that is how it has evolved over these years. We've had 4 major uprisings in Iran in the last decade, and each time the regime has turned to brutal force, and with that it has been able to buy time until the next time, and then the next time it's dealt with the same way or in the same manner. So this time around, people of Iran have really do understand that we have to go for the long haul, and we have to make sure that we can overthrow this regime in its entirety. So I think that is where we stand. And I also think that more than ever, the world is seeing, why is it that the Iranian resistance has always, promoted this third option, the fact that, neither appeasement nor war is the solution. And it comes from a deep understanding of Iran's history, its role in the region, and just the nature of the regime. And I think that's something that today the world needs to hear more clearly and to listen to more precisely. Right after the start of the war, Mrs. Rajavi actually gave two statements, I think, on the first day of the war. One in the first hours that the war broke out, and one after the death of Khamenei was confirmed. And I think that she has touched on some very important issues in both statements. And this is simultaneous with the NCRI actually announcing the provisional government for the transfer of sovereignty to the people of Iran based on the 10-point plan presented by Mrs. Rajavi. So this is all, signs that we've entered a new chapter and a new phase. But in these circumstances, it's really important to understand where it is that the people of Iran are coming from and what it is that they are calling for and why. The reason that they think that war is not the solution, and the reason that they think that it's really important that the people of Iran take their destiny into their own hands, these all are rooted in historic facts and precedents that we've seen over the last century. And so it's really important for the international community to pay close attention to it today.
I think it shows a lot of maturity in relation to the other countries in that region, because that's a great way to look at it. That you know that if a war starts, you guys are going to suffer the consequences of it. It's not going to be the U.S. or Israel or whoever else just starts or ends the war. It's going to be the Iranian people. So that's not an option. And then appeasement, you're just going to have the same thing you're doing right now. So I love that third option. I mean, I think that's a great way to look at it. And again, that shows that you're not just trying to overthrow the government for whatever reason. You have a plan, and you have the wherewithal to know it's got to be done correctly for it to last. Like I said, it's very forward-thinking idea for that region. Not a lot of your neighbors share that same sentiment. Real quick, what does Miss Rajavi? What is she? Is she not interested at all in working with any outside parties? I mean, not in a way that she may, not military support, but like diplomatic support or political support? Is she looking for any help in that regard?
Political support is something that this resistance has always actually had. I mean, right now, the 10-point plan presented by Mrs. Rajavi has garnered the support of over 4,000 lawmakers around the world, and over 130 heads of state or former heads of state have supported her 10-point plan. Also, there are many prominent personalities, both in the U.S. and in different countries, who do support her stance and her views, and see her as the solution for the future of Iran. Even, for instance, among U.S. lawmakers and also U.S. politicians. I mean, if you look at the narratives that are, the things that are being stated in the last week by former high-ranking government officials in the U.S., a lot of them are touching on this issue. Like, for instance, we actually had a online conference on Thursday where General James Jones was one of those who was speaking, and he was, emphasizing that this 10-point plan is truly a Jeffersonian and roadmap, and this is something that we need to support. And this is why it's, from a point of view of one of the highest generals in the U.S.
Sure.
Modern history. He understands the situation, and so he is giving that viewpoint. Or, like, for instance, Wesley Clark or Secretary Pompeo or others who stand, no matter from which side of the aisle they're from, but they stand in solidarity and in full support of this movement and what Mrs. Rajavi presents as the solution. And so I think that that is something that we've actually always had. If you look in the past 40 years, it's practically been constant. The fact that we have like the majority support of parliaments around the world every year practically, and this has been part and parcel of the activities of this resistance. But I think right now in these very turbulent times, just in the past, on Thursday, one of the lawmakers actually in the conference announced that within less than 48 hours, over 470 European lawmakers had signed a joint statement in support of the provisional government being set forth by Mrs. Rajavi in the National Council of Resistance of Iran. And that is something that now growing momentum. I think that we will see it in the thousands very soon. And I think that's really important in the mix of everything and all the chaos right now, that lawmakers are stepping forward and showing their support and solidarity with this statement and why they think that this is the solution forward, no matter where they stand politically. Some of these people who have signed the statement on normal basis, they would not agree on anything with one another, but this is the one issue that they all agree on. So I think that is really important. And also, I wanted to touch on something you just mentioned. You mentioned that it shows the maturity of this movement, but also I think it's really important to note in the message that Mrs. Rajavi gave after the death of Khamenei, I think at the end of it, she emphasizes that the NCRI and the provisional government are not seeking power, but rather the transfer of power to the sovereignty of the Iranian people. And I think that's key, and that is something that really needs to be addressed, because I think that is what sets us on the path forward. In her message after the death of Khamenei, she actually outlines what is this provisional government that we talk about. For a lot of Iranians or those who have been involved with the resistance, this is something that's clear because it's something that has been written out completely back since 1981. So it's something it's new for us, but the fact that she is outlining it again for the world to know, this is for instance, from based on the resolutions of the NCRI, once the provisional government is established on Iranian territory, it is obliged to hold free and fair elections within 6 months for a national legislative and constitutional assembly. And the duties of the assembly are to draft the new constitution and determine the new republican system of the country, and legislate for the administration of current affairs until the formation of the new actually the first National Assembly under the new constitution, and to designate a government which, following the resignation of the 6-month provisional government, will assume responsibility for the country's affairs under the supervision of the Constituent Assembly. And outlining that all, so this is how it's going to be: 6 months interim government, which will put together the, free and fair elections for people to choose that body who is going to be writing the new constitution. Then once they write that constitution, and once they're actually elected, this provisional government's job is finished. This assembly will be running the country and also drafting the new constitution, and then that constitution is going to be voted on by the people directly again, and then based on that there's going to be free elections for the new republic, for the presidency or prime minister or whatever, however that system is going to work. But I think that outlining that and giving specific time frames on it, it really clarifies a lot of things, and it actually you know, especially since, you know, the 6-month interim government is going to be running based on the 10-point plan. But I mean, there are complete plans for the entire system, but the outline would be the 10-point plan. And I think that serves like as a guardrail to make sure that we're set on the correct path forward in regards to creating a true secular democracy in Iran.
Does Ms. Rajavi, is she going to seek the presidency if that's what you guys decide to do, or is she just going to set it up and then kind of like let it go and let us see how it pans out? Is she looking to lead, or is she just looking to set it up so to have a better Iran, or both?
I think maybe it's a bit of both, because she has been chosen by the NCRI as the president-elect for the interim government. Because there are some people who because they don't understand that term exactly, so they're like, she's been your president-elect since the 1990s. I'm like, well, because she is actually chosen as the president-elect for the interim government. That interim government has not come into power yet, so she will be the president-elect during that interim government. And then once the free elections are held after the constitution is finalized, she, whoever the people choose will become the next president. Would she be open to being a candidate? I'm not really sure. Knowing her, probably not. But that's all something that we will have to wait and see how it, comes out. But right now, she would be the president-elect for 2.5 years. So it'll be the 6-month interim government and the maximum 2 years in the process of the new constitution coming out and the elections being held for the actual presidency of the republic and the parliament.
Okay, so there's still some remnants of the old leadership in power. Is that who the war is with? You would think that once they once the leader has been eliminated, you guys can just move in with this 10-point plan.
No, that can't happen, because that's the thing. That's how Iran is different from, for instance, the Venezuela scenario, or even the current regime is different from the Shah's time. Okay. For instance, in 1979, when you remove the Shah, the whole system falls, because it's based on that one person, and that's that single leader. Right. This system, it has a supreme leader, but under it, there's this whole apparatus. It's a republic, and to some extent, right? So, okay, Khamenei is removed, but that system is still intact. So right now, until they choose the new supreme leader, they have a team of 3, based on the constitution, the current constitution of the regime. They have a team of 3 leading the country until the new supreme leader is chosen by them. And that team of 3 is the head of the judiciary, the president, and one person from the assembly of experts, which is these mullahs who choose the supreme leader. So right now it's that team of 3 who are heading the system until they decide their new supreme leader. In this scenario that, for instance, the president had also been killed, I mean, the situation would have been different, because then there would be a team of 3 who would be replacing the president too, and those 3 would have to be part of that team of 3. So it'll just mix things up for the regime. But I mean, the system is the reality is that that's how the system was built, to make sure that they can keep themselves afloat even if the supreme leader is eliminated or dies in whatever method. So this is exactly what happened when Khomeini died, because after Khomeini died, it took a while for Khamenei to be announced. And that was when Rafsanjani actually stepped in to make sure that this is taken care of quickly and the new supreme leader is chosen, because they knew that the regime was at a very weak position. But the reality is that Khamenei never, even though he ruled for 37 years in comparison to 10 years that Khomeini ruled, he never gained the legitimacy or even the strength or like the power that Khomeini had. So whatever comes next is probably going to be weaker, but the reality is that the regime is still intact. So it doesn't mean like regime change or anything of that nature.
Aren't they a little apprehensive about trying to choose a supreme leader now based on the supreme leader being eliminated? And then when they met to try to find another supreme leader, that meeting was eliminated. Or I mean, what's the vibe coming out of Iran and that regime? Do you have anybody that has their finger on the pulse of the, for lack of a better word, enemy regime? Are they scared? Are they apprehensive? Are they mad? Like how are they reacting to people getting taken out by airstrikes?
The regime itself, of course, I mean, for them, it's like a major blow. I think that, I mean, right now, there are a lot of rumors going around. It's really very difficult to verify anything right now because there isn't, all communication lines have been cut off in Iran deliberately for these things not to leak out. But there have been like a lot of like, I guess, different narratives that are being fed. Like, for instance, there are a lot of, things circulating in regards to maybe, Mojtaba Khomeini is the next supreme leader, so the son of Khomeini, or there were talks of another mullah being chosen, but and maybe they have already chosen that person and just not announcing it out of fear of retaliation or that person being targeted. So we just have to wait and see either way where the regime plans on going with this. I think that in one way they might want to drag this out, but on another side, it's not to their benefit to drag things out. They need to try to normalize things as soon as they can. So, I mean, this whole thing is a process, and we have to see like where they go. And the fact that it's been 8 days, and there's still not a clear sign of when they even want to have Khomeini buried or where, because I think they're afraid of it being targeted. I think they're in a very tight situation, and I think we just have to wait and see how things play out. I don't think we're in a position to be making assessments, or we might have assessments ourselves, but it's, announcing those assessments might not be very exact or the best thing to do. So I think
you don't want to tip your hat. You don't want to show your cards. You want to keep them close to the chest so they don't have an idea of where you guys are in all this. That makes sense. So I realize that the war aspect, that's not you don't like that option and you don't like the appeasement, but while not optimal and while you don't approve of it, are these strikes helping you at all? Are they taking down these leaders, putting these people on their heels, maybe weakening them a little bit so that the people have an opportunity to kind of rise up and overthrow? What do you think about that?
I think that it's not that easy to be like, yes, this is helping us, because the reality is that you also have to see the other side of the repercussions that it has.
Sure.
Especially the civilian casualties, the infrastructure that is being destroyed. Like some historic places in Iran were destroyed too in this war. Yeah. And we saw, I don't know if you saw the footages that came out yesterday. They were hitting like very close to the Azadi Square, which for Iranians, I mean, that symbolizes something. And just people at the demonstration today were saying, that just hit really close to home for us, the fact that this is the reality of what is happening in Iran. Unfortunately, we're not seeing everything that is happening, but like from the reports that we are receiving, it is very trickled because there isn't much communication methods. But what is clear is that this has actually, it's allowing the regime to suppress with more open hands in face of the people, and to just be able to use it as a way to push everyone into their homes, because people do have to take cover, and they need to, when there's bombs flying over your head, it's not the best time to be coming out in a demonstration or protest or to carry out any kind of activities against the regime, because you're going to be a target. You're going to have a target on your back too. So I think that this is a difficult time for the people of Iran. And I think the more the war becomes more extensive, the more people are realizing, the devastations of the war, and they're coming face, that sinks in the war mentality and, this circumstances. And so I think that those all play a major game here. I don't know if I did mention before about what was happening days before the start of the war with the resistance units and the activity that they were having. So we were going in that direction. And the fact that, for instance, even on Sunday last week, we saw, 2 prisons in Mariban and Mahabad who were attacked by the people of Iran, local people in these cities. And they were able to have some of the detainees from the protests and political prisoners released. That is a step forward, but since Sunday that the war has taken, on larger dimensions, all of those type of activities have been limited, or it's not even possible. Or for instance, on Saturday, we saw that one of the barracks in Hashgard and Karaj was attacked by resistance units, and they were able to disarm the entire those units that were there, and were able to arm the people to be able to defend themselves. So we were seeing these things, but right now, with the way the war is going, it's not even possible for people to carry out such operations or activities. But we're seeing that, for instance, the first 2 days of the war, we were seeing people being mobilized to take this front, to take this fight to the next level. And I think that is what we need to concentrate on, but that's not going to happen until this war is still continuing, because it's not even possible. So that is something that we need to take into consideration. And also the fact that, we've also seen this in other places where Iran's proxies were involved, but the Iranian regime does take refuge for its military personnel and whatnot, or the operations or the things that it carries out. They do use civilian infrastructures. And so then that is what the radars are catching, and that is what is being targeted. So it's killing people more and more. And this is actually what the regime strives on. Khomeini used to say that war is holy, and we're going to continue the war, talking about the Iran-Iraq war, till the last house is standing in Tehran. Well, that is the mentality of this regime. They're like, if I'm going to go down, I'm going to take all of you down with me. So it is open to having all of Iran destroyed, if that means, keeping itself afloat. You have to understand, understand the nature of this regime, and then understand, the effects of a foreign war. And that is what we oppose. And that's why we think that, war is not the solution. It needs to be from the people of Iran, and change to be brought. Because right now, I think that it's practically most provinces of Iran are being targeted in this war right now. And, so it's not just major regime points or whatever. It's, throughout the country. And so, but you can't overthrow a regime from the sky. And troops on the ground are not the solution in Iran. So, at the end of the day, what are you going to do? You need to have the people of Iran to be able to step in. But the people of Iran will not step in when there's a foreign war going on in their country.
Sure. It's dangerous.
It's both dangerous, but they also don't want to be labeled as the fifth column of this, government or that government or whatnot.
Oh, right.
Their independence is very key, because otherwise it's going to be, just look at the talking points of Reza Pahlavi right now, because he depends on foreign intervention to come into power. And that's why he's been calling for it, actually. And that's why he's been actually, a lot of this we kept on wondering, like, why are they manipulating so many things and trying to present it with such exaggeration, presenting things which are completely false, and what is behind it. What was behind it was he wanted to show that, you look, I have enough support from people who say the solution is a war, so please attack Iran and go and install me instead. Unfortunately, like last week, he did an interview with Fox, I think it was, and he clearly states, and they asked him, would you be open to, going to Iran and, taking up that position of leadership or whatnot? And he's like, yes, I would be willing to do that in the first opportunity that is possible, but it would need to be properly orchestrated. The fact that he actually says that, that shows where he stands and what he believes in. On one hand, you see the Iranian resistance and Mrs. Rajavi who say, look, no, we don't want any kind of foreign intervention. We have the capability to bring about that change. He doesn't have anything to be able to bring about change with it, and he's not willing to pay the price for that change either. So he's like, well, please orchestrate it so so you can go and place me on the throne. How do the people of Iran have to tell you that they don't want another throne? And and yesterday he gave a message that he said, I'm willing to take on, that responsibility that people have asked me to. And everyone's like, who asked you? Because we haven't seen anyone who's asking you to take that responsibility, because you're not capable of doing that. If you read like the quotes on that tweet, it's very interesting. People are like, where's your CV? Oh, I'm sorry, I forgot. You haven't worked a day in your life. So like, where do you I mean, it's not a game. It's the
no, I get what you're saying. Yeah, it's laughable because like what makes this guy think he can? He just put himself there. He's not has no qualifications and he just feels like he should be in that position. Let me ask you this, because even during the American Revolution, like we had help from the French and we had help from other countries and the indigenous people. Don't you think it? I mean, have you ever thought about just reaching out to maybe Israel or the U.S. and just being like, look, we can't have you guys bombing us, but we will accept some sort of guidance or advisor role to help us with these resistance raids. I mean, I would think, to me, if I was running these raids, it would seem beneficial to have somebody who's actually done this stuff before to show me the right way to do it. You know what I mean? Not necessarily like not putting Miss Rajavi on the throne, but saying, look, we need a little assistance. I mean, it's not like in a way that we're taking over, but like I said, I mean, everybody helps everybody when they're trying to overthrow a government. It's hard to do unilaterally. So, would you guys be open to that, or you just don't want anybody at all helping out, or what do you think?
We don't want foreign intervention from any government. And actually, Ms. Rajavi reiterates this in the message after the death of Khamenei too, that we don't want money, we don't want foreign troops or on the ground or anything like that. The reason behind it is also, first of all, to have an understanding of the Iranian resistance. Well, if it wasn't for this resistance, the world would have never known about Iran's nuclear program. So that intelligence comes from the network of this resistance. So they know what they're doing on the ground. They know what they had till now. I mean, not only about Iran's nuclear program, practically on every arena, if you go into it, who was the one who's been the first source of information in regards to how this regime operates and what it does? It's been the resistance. So we don't lack any knowledge there. I
didn't mean to imply. I didn't mean to imply you didn't know what you were doing. It's just sometimes it's nice to have a U.S. guy.
I understand exactly what you were saying,
okay,
and I understand you didn't mean that, but just the reference there, and also the 8-year war with Iraq. The reason that it came to an end, and this is something that is not really spoken about a lot, and the facts are not being presented correctly. The reason that Khomeini accepted the ceasefire with Iraq was due to just 3 operations which were carried out by the National Liberation Army between March 1988 and July 1988. So after the second operation, actually, Khomeini was like, I am drinking the chalice of poison. We have to put an end to this war, because otherwise, in the war with Iraq, we would lose one province, Khuzestan. In the war with the National Liberation Army, we're going to lose the whole system. We're going to be overthrown. And that is when Khomeini was like, you know what? We need to put an end to this war. The reason was the minute that the ceasefire went into action, that means all borders are closed, and it would be a violation of international law for the National Liberation Army to cross over into Iranian soil, even though it was an independent entity and it had nothing to do with the Iraqi government or their military. So for 8 years, no one was able to bring Khomeini to agree to a ceasefire. Even after, I mean, if you look at the history of the 8-year war with Iraq, after 1982, Iraq had pulled out of Iranian soil completely. So Iran could have signed a peace treaty then, but refused to, because Khomeini believed war is holy, and we're going to continue the war till the last house in Tehran, because the path to Jerusalem goes through Karbala. So that was his, idea. And he continued the war for 6 years. And the only thing that stopped him from, continuing the war was only the National Liberation Army, which was unfortunately disarmed by the US in 2003, which was part of the policy of appeasement toward the Iranian regime. So just imagine if we actually still had that full, army with over 2,500, heavy artillery, tanks, all of that, which was, taken away from the people of Iran, because it was all actually bought either independently or it was confiscated from the regime. So that National Liberation Army, at that time, I remember it was the largest, liberation army that has ever existed. And it was so complex, and it was so, it had so many capabilities that were really unprecedented. And, that was all taken away due to the policy of appeasement. So we have that experience. And the reality is that we have the know-how, we know what needs to be done. But unfortunately, what needs to stop is the policy of appeasement, and that's the only thing we're asking for. That is like the best thing that the world could do, is stop the policy of appeasement toward the regime, and we would be happy with that.
Sure.
We're not asking for much more, but we are asking for, like, for instance, I think if governments start recognizing the provisional government, that will be a positive step, because it has then at the table of the international arena, instead of the Iranian regime, it would be representatives of the resistance, and we can set forth a lot of things. So I think that is the direction that we're going towards, and hopefully we will be able to push for that.
Is the NCRI still affiliated with the MEK, or is that, what's that relationship still look like?
Yes, the MEK. So you understand, MEK is like the largest opposition group in Iran.
Okay.
The MEK, after June 20th, 1981, they realized that you can't continue to fight this regime only through peaceful means, because the regime opened fire on peaceful protesters, and that was like the turning point. I mean, within days, the regime executed like thousands of people, aside from those that they had killed in the streets. And then they started going underground, and they started, the armed resistance against this regime.
Mm-hmm.
So that was June 20th, 1981. 1 month later, Mr. Masud Rajavi, he announced, he gave a call to action, I guess, for the formation of the National Council of Resistance of Iran, because they realized that if we're going to be overthrowing this regime, if we're going to be able to overthrow Khomeini, we need to bring together, to form like a coalition between different organizations, different people from different, ethnicities, different religious. Everyone needs to be represented here, and we all need to join forces together to be able to fight this regime, because unity and solidarity is really key to be able to overthrow this regime in its entirety. And so they extended that platform, and they really allowed even people who were just individuals, maybe, but they weren't necessarily supportive of the MEK, to be able to have like a platform to come and fight against the regime. And so the NCRI was formed. At first, I think at the beginning it started with like 60, 70 different personalities from different groups and organizations. At the beginning, I think if you look at the history, like the first 4 or 5 years, you see at that time, for instance, the Kurdish Democratic Party was part of it. The Fadai guerrillas are part of it, and different organizations and things who had joined. They had 3 set rules, I guess, like guidelines, and one was separation of religion and state and the future of Iran, believing in the overthrow of the regime completely. So the complete overthrow of the regime, and that you can't negotiate with this regime, and the formation of a republic for Iran. So those were the 3 criteria for the NCRI. And but over the years, as the fight continued to prolong, there were those who unfortunately did not abide by these 3 rules, because like they started believing in, maybe we should negotiate with this regime. Unfortunately, that is what happened with like the Democratic Party of Kurdistan, and unfortunately their leaders were assassinated at the negotiation table. That is exactly why the NCRI didn't believe in doing so. Or like, for instance, there were those who during the Khatami years, they thought maybe this regime is reformable, and so they were expelled from the NCRI. But the NCRI has continued to grow, and there are over 460 members right now in the NCRI, and 52% of which are women, and it is continuing its activities, but it also has extended its hand out again, actually from 22 years ago, actually 24 years ago now. 24 years ago, the NCRI recommended the formation of a solidarity front, where again, they said solidarity and unity is really important if we really want to overthrow the regime, even if you do not agree with the NCRI's viewpoints, not even the MEK, like NCRI's even viewpoints, that's fine. But if you agree to having a secular democratic republic in Iran, you're more than welcome to join, and we would actually provide. We will even provide whatever means or logistics or whatever that you need for you to be able to continue and be part of this fight, because we think that unity is necessary. And in recent months, we've been actually seeing signs of that. Like, for instance, in the demonstration that we had in Berlin like last month, there were groups and people representing like 16 different other organizations who came in solidarity and came in to that demonstration, which had been hosted by the National Council of Resistance of Iran. Or like, for instance, today we had representatives from who spoke from the Fadai organization, from Khibat, from Kurdistan. We had like Lor representing like the Lor ethnicities or a minority in Iran, or different people from like really different walks of life who were all there in solidarity and unity. So we have been working on that, and we have been extending that hand out, not just now or today, but this has been a continuous path, because we think that it's really important. And I think that this is something that needs to be highlighted, that solidarity and unity is really key in such sensitive moments. And I also think that, like, for instance, despite any differences that we may have, and that is fine, because in each society, you're not going to have everyone agree on everything. There are, different viewpoints, and all of it needs to be respected, and all of it needs to have a place in that society to work together. I think that the unity that we are seeing that's forming more today than ever so before is, like, for instance, this unity. I guess you could say, like, there's the People's Front, and then there's, like, I think they're drawing the line. I guess where they're drawing the line is today is against any form of tyranny. So that is, like, where the line is being drawn, and I think it goes, like, kind of like with the slogans inside of Iran too, like, down with the oppressor, be it the Shah or the Mullah. So that is where they're drawing the line. Like, if you are opposed to both, the monarchy and the mullahs, that is where everyone is standing united together.
Yeah, I don't think that that's a bad way to look at it at all. I mean, we have that. We have a couple different political parties. We have different groups, and yeah, once in a while there's a little dust up, but for the most part, we argue and we disagree, but then we're still one country, and I think you guys can work to that end as well. I think that's a good goal to have. Let me just ask you this: does Israel acknowledge the fact that it's not the Iranian people that are saying death to America, but it's the regime, or death to Israel? But it's the regime that's saying this, and that everybody else is like, we just want these guys out of here too. Yeah. So do you think, has there been any talks like that with us and Israel, or, are you guys reaching out and saying, look, we're trying to do our best here, like, give us a break? Or have you negotiated at all? I don't know. It just seems like if your group is doing your thing, then I would think that we want to support you. Either us or Israel would want to be supportive, whatever you need, even if it's just political, or, just to say some positive things about your movement. Are you getting that vibe, or is it the opposite, or is it nothing?
I think that I don't think any of the governments have any illusions. I think for everyone it's clear that those who oppose, those who chant death to Israel in the U.S. and whatnot, that's the Iranian regime and not the people of Iran. I think that is something that's clear for everyone.
Like, we all know that. And, like, that's what we all assume. Yeah.
Yeah, I think that is clear to everyone.
Yeah.
But what you mentioned, that you think that clearly they would support, like, a democratic government in Iran. No, they unfortunately that's not the case. Because unfortunately, there are other interests that, I guess, play into factor. The reality is that a independent democratic government in Iran also has its implications for the region, because Iran plays a very important role geopolitically, and it always is able to shift the tide, and so it might bring with it change in a lot of other countries too.
And the other guy's probably a little more easier to control, and you guys are more set on having Iranian independence, as opposed to this guy who wants them to orchestrate this overthrow and then put him in place. He's just going to be some. I don't want to discount the guy. I don't know him that well, but maybe he's just some patsy that does what we tell him to do.
Yeah, exactly. He would be like a puppet government, but that is exactly what we don't want. But on the other hand, Iran is, unfortunately, this is like our curse. Iran is a very rich country in natural resources, and it also plays a very important geopolitical role. So that's why there's always so many different interest groups who want to have a say in what is happening in Iran. So that is what has also, helped extend the lifeline of the regime. I think that, I think the views of the Iranian resistance are clear, as outlined in the 10-point plan too. We believe in coexistence with all countries in the region, and we want to be able to see in friendship between all of the neighboring countries, and to be able to see stability and peace in the region. And I think that we can actually play a major role in creating that peace and stability also in the region. Just because imagine all of Iran's proxy groups being eliminated, removed, dismantled completely. That will really help throughout the region. But also, like, for instance, our stance is clear in regards to the conflict in the region, where we stand in regards to a two-state policy. But we also have, let's make it clear, we have very close ties and relations, not from today, but, like, for instance, especially when you're speaking about the MEK, for 60 years with PLO. But, like, for instance, we support a two-state, policy, and we believe that, this war and destruction really needs to end. So, I mean, but our stances are very clear. We are not one to change our views or values based on what is popular today and what's not tomorrow. We don't, in Farsi, we have a saying, they say there are some who change positions with the wind. We're not that. No matter what the price, we stand for what we believe in. And sometimes it might come at a cost. Sometimes it might not be the smartest thing to do, at least when people look at it like short term. But we have learned that, what is important is to stand by your principles and your values and to move forward with that. And that is actually what builds trust in a society. And in a society like Iran's, trust is really important, because unfortunately, the people's trust has been betrayed for so long. And that is one of the greatest crimes, I think, perpetrated by Khomeini, to be honest. Despite all the killings and all the destruction, but betrayal of people's trust. And to rebuild that trust in that society, that's really important, and that's going to take time. And because especially with all the propaganda and everything that's out there. But I think that a resistance movement that has been able to withstand the test of time based on two values. One is honesty and one is sacrifice. I think that will open its path, in the future too. I think that when people see the dedication that exists within this resistance, the fact that, actually I was one of the British MPs and on Thursday during this live online conference, he mentioned something that really it was really touching for me, as someone who has seen this face to face, day to day. But he mentioned that, Mrs. Rajavi became an activist with the MEK when she was 19 as a student. And she has dedicated over practically now over 50 years of her life to the fight for freedom in Iran. That kind of devotion, that kind of sacrifice, I mean, literally it's been day in, day out, 24/7 for, 5 decades that she has been fighting for the freedom of Iran without wanting anything in return, without thinking of yourself. Without taking even a vacation of some sort, you know what I mean? And putting that responsibility on your own shoulder. Because it's one thing to be like, for instance, I'm a member of this movement. I don't bear that huge responsibility on my shoulders, to be responsible for everything that is happening inside of Iran and all the crimes that are being perpetrated, and people looking at me for the solution. But she has been bearing that on her shoulder for 40 years now, practically, and she has never withered away or stepped back or never expected anything from anyone else. Be like, well, I've done more than my part. Why don't you guys, take up your own responsibility? She
Right.
doesn't do that. And I think that she's not, it's not just her, but it's like throughout the ranks of this movement, you see that kind of dedication. I know people
Sure.
who, for the most part, I mean, and they've joined this movement in their late teens or early 20s, and they've been part of this movement for over 4 decades or 5 decades, some, and there are those who have been in it from practically the first days, so it's 60 years now. And when you see that, I think that is exactly what people feel like they can trust, because they're not in it for power, they're not in it for name recognition. They came in to this resistance thinking that they probably won't even survive 1 or 2 years, because how brutal the regime is that they're fighting against, because that's when they joined, they were seeing that people were being killed left and right.
Yeah.
But they made that commitment, and they've never given up. And I think I was speaking to a Ukrainian lawmaker a while back, and she was telling me, you know what, you guys are like runners. There are some runners who run a sprint. So whenever something happens in Iran, they come to the scene and they're present for a few months, and they run a sprint. So they start doing things because, I mean, this is like something out of the norm for them, and they're dedicated for it for a few months. And then once it drags out for a few months, you don't see them anymore. But you guys have been in it. It's like a marathon. You guys are the marathon runners. Not everyone who runs a sprint is able to run a marathon. And that marathon is really important to make sure that you see it to its end. And I think that that kind of dedication is what people of Iran need, to be able to really build that trust again, and to be able to really be able to be that that remedy for society, to be able to all this pain, all those wounds that exist in our society, they need care, they need attendance, they need to see that that selflessness, and I think that is something that will create a very beautiful society in the near future, I hope. We actually had a conference in December. It was right the last week of December, so it was really never aired because it wasn't. It was more internal at first, but and then a few days later the uprising started, so we never had the chance to really air it. But it was a conference of like Iranian experts in the diaspora who had come together, and they were presenting their ideas and solutions to the problems that exist currently in Iran, be it in regards to Iran's environment. There were people from different sectors coming together, and when you looked at it, and you were in awe, like, look at all of these talents that we have. And the brain drain issue really comes to mind, because one of the things that they were saying, that in every university in the US, there's at least one Iranian professor right now. We had with us that day, like, for instance, someone who heads one of the departments in NASA. We had someone who has over 170 patents under his name and is working at Caltech, and this and that. The person who's heading one of the research institutes in Scandinavian countries and things like. I mean, all of them that you looked at them, they really have, been able to really make their mark in the world. But all of them were saying that we yearn for the day that Iran will be free, so we could go and serve our own people. And a lot of them were saying that that day, of course, we're going to be doing this pro bono, because that's been our dream all of these years that we've been denied. And so just imagine all of that pouring into the country, I think that we will see Iran flourish really fast, and to be able to see a true democracy form in the region. Maybe Iran will become that oasis in the middle of the Middle East, and hopefully it could serve as a guide or as a precedent for a lot of other countries to follow suit.
Yeah, I think it's very inspiring. I mean, what you guys are doing. I couldn't imagine having to flee my country because it was too hard to live here because of the oppression or the violence. But I think my whole life, Iran has been the quote unquote bad guy. You know what I mean? Since I was a kid, it was either one thing or the other. And again, not people, just the government. So it would be odd, but also a great thing for this to happen. You know what I mean? For Iran to be, I don't want to say normal, but like, peaceful, region or peaceful area that we could visit maybe. And I hope you guys get what you need and get what you want, and keep up the fight. I think what you're doing is phenomenal. And like I said, it's very inspiring, and I hope you don't quit. I can't promise that we won't help out, but against your will, but it may be that, but I would say, maybe just see what happens at the end. You know what I mean? I mean, you don't have to like it. You don't have to approve of it, but I think people's hearts are in the right place. And I really appreciate you coming on and giving us an update of what has happened since the last time we talked. It's fascinating because we only get those little snippets on Fox News or MSNBC or whatever it is. I really can't thank you enough for letting us know about what's going on in Iran and just keeping us posted.
Well, thank you very much for having me, and it was a pleasure to be with you. And I hope that we can give positive updates on Iran in the near future. As you said, I think that we hope that we can bring about that Iran. And I know that, and I mentioned this before, I think that people are able to differentiate between the people and the regime.
For sure.
And
100%.
and that is very key. I think that's why, like, for instance, I remember growing up in school, like, for instance, people would ask this, like, where are you from? We'd be like, we're Persian. And one time I remember I had a history teacher who told me, like, he called me over and he was like, so you guys have formed a Persian club, huh? I was like, yeah, we formed a Persian club. And he said, so why aren't you calling it Iranian club, and why is it Persian club? I was like, well, that's not a very difficult question to answer. You could just ask people, like, what they think when they hear the word Persian and what they think when they hear the word Iranian. And unfortunately, that has been something that we've lived with. And I remember back then, I pulled out, like, randomly, like, 5 people in the hallway of our high school, and I was like, so what comes to your mind when they say Iran? What comes to your Iranian? What comes to your mind when they say Persian? And when they said Persian, it was like all these nice things, rich culture, Persian rugs, like,
right,
this and that, like, everything was, smart people, very cultured, this and that. I mean, it was all positive. And then when I said Iranian, they're like, terrorist, the hostage taking and things of that nature. I was like, okay, so there you go.
It's not fair, is it? It's not fair to you guys.
I was like, yeah, exactly. So that is why we stick to Persian club instead of Iranian club.
Well, I hope one day in the near future you don't have to worry about any of those negative stereotypes anymore. I hope you guys get what you need.
All right. Have a nice day. Thank you very much.